Everything I worked for, my savings, my future, gone in an instant. But it wasn't just the money I was about to lose. It was my self-respect. The words echoed in my head as I sat at that dinner table. It had started like any other casual evening with family, but I had no idea this would be the night everything changed. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the trust that had been broken and the line that had been crossed. As I looked around the table at my cousin Jake and his wife Bella, I knew that what they were asking wasn't just unreasonable, it was outrageous. I was Alex, a self-made 30-year-old who had always valued financial security above all else. Growing up in New York City, I'd seen firsthand the damage that financial struggle could cause. My parents weren't rich, but they worked hard and they taught me how to save, how to make every dollar count. I wasn't living large, but I was comfortable. I had a steady job, a growing savings account, and a strong sense of financial discipline. Every decision I made was calculated, ensuring that I had a safety net to fall back on. While others spent recklessly, I focused on the future, my future. But here I was, sitting across from my cousin and his wife, about to face an impossible decision. Jake and Bella had never been financially responsible. They lived for today, always chasing the next big thing, the next big idea that was going to make them rich. They had a history of jumping from one business venture to the next, each time believing they had finally found the golden ticket. And each time, they failed. Yet, here they were again, pitching me their latest idea, claiming that this time it would be different. "We have a business opportunity for you," Jake said with that familiar grin of his, the kind of grin that always made me uneasy. I set my fork down, sensing that this wasn't just a casual conversation. "What's this one about?" I asked, already bracing myself. Bella, always eager to jump in, was the first to speak up. "We're opening a luxury pet spa in Manhattan. This is going to be huge," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "We just need a little bit of financial support." I raised an eyebrow. "A pet spa?" Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Nothing crazy. Just a small investment, around $100,000. My stomach sank. $100,000? I repeated, trying to process what he was saying. I was sure I had misheard him. Bella placed her hand on mine, trying to comfort me. "We know it's a lot, but think of it as an investment. You'll get your money back in no time." I stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. These were the same people who had failed repeatedly in their ventures. And now they were asking me for $100,000? I wasn't going to risk everything I had worked for on their latest golden idea. "So, how much are you two putting in?" I asked, my voice steady, but with an edge. The table fell silent. Jake looked away briefly, and Bella shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Well, we're already putting in our time and a little bit of money," Jake said, his voice faltering. I couldn't hide my disbelief. "So, you want me to front the majority of the money, while you two contribute your time and some cash?" Bella scoffed, a flicker of annoyance flashing in her eyes. "Come on, Alex. You can afford it. You own your apartment, you have no kids, no debt. What are you even saving for?" "Emergencies," I said firmly. "Retirement. Things that actually matter." That was it. The moment the words left my mouth, their faces fell. Jake leaned forward, now visibly irritated. "You're being selfish," he snapped. "Family is supposed to help each other." I shook my head. "I'm not helping you fund your reckless business ventures. I'm not going to put my savings at risk for something that has no real plan." The room fell into silence. Jake and Bella exchanged looks, clearly not pleased with my refusal. "You'll regret this," Bella muttered under her breath, before storming out with Jake following close behind. As they left, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mixed with growing anger. I had said no, and I felt good about it. But little did I know, this was only the beginning of what would soon become a nightmare. The next few weeks would shake my world. What started as a simple refusal to lend money would soon spiral into a much bigger problem, one that would change everything. As they stormed out, I had no idea that my decision would trigger a chain of events that I could never have anticipated. The evening after our dinner, I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that had settled in my stomach. Jake and Bella's words echoed in my mind, and the tension between us felt like an unbearable weight. I knew I had made the right decision, but the pressure was mounting. They weren't going to let this go easily. It all started with Jake sending me a text the next day, a message that seemed more like a thinly veiled threat than an attempt to resolve the situation. "I don't know why you're being so difficult," it read. "We're family. I thought we could count on you." I didn't respond right away, but by evening Bella called. Her voice was sweet but laced with an undercurrent of anger that was hard to ignore. "Alex, you need to understand something," she began. "We're struggling, okay? We don't have the luxury of sitting on a pile of cash like you do. You don't know what it's like to be in our shoes." Her words stung. Sitting on a pile of cash? What did she mean by that? I wasn't hoarding money for no reason. I had worked hard to save, to build a secure future for myself, a future where I wouldn't have to worry about every penny. I tried to stay calm, but the pressure was getting to me. "I'm not just sitting on my savings, Bella," I said. "I've worked hard for everything I have. My savings are for my future. I'm not just going to risk that on some random business venture with no plan behind it. I don't even know what kind of business you're running." Bella didn't like that answer. "You're so selfish," she shot back. "We're family. Don't you care about us? You're just sitting in your nice apartment, enjoying the good life while we're here struggling." Her words hit harder than I expected. Family, I thought. What did that really mean? Was I supposed to throw away my own future for theirs? Was it my responsibility to clean up the mess they had created by living beyond their means? The frustration burned in my chest, but I couldn't let their guilt trip sway me. "I do care, Bella," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I can't afford to be careless with my money. I can't gamble with my future. I'm not going to put my hard-earned savings into a business with no structure and no clear plan. I have to think about what's best for me." The line went silent. I could almost hear her breathing through the phone. "I get it," she finally said, her voice cold. "But don't expect us to forget this, Alex. Don't come crying to us when you're the one left alone." The guilt trip continued, but I stood firm. Their empty promises did nothing to change my mind. Jake had said they'd pay me back with interest if I helped them out. How many times had they said that before? Their past failed ventures and reckless spending made it clear that they couldn't be trusted. And now they wanted me to bail them out, yet again, with no accountability or any sense of responsibility. Days passed, but the tension only grew. Every time I saw Jake or Bella's name pop up on my phone, I felt a knot in my stomach. My refusal to help had created a rift between us that I wasn't sure how to bridge. They had always been the kind of people who expected things to be handed to them, and my refusal had been a slap in the face. The more they pushed, the more I realized this wasn't about business. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. They had always seen me as an easy source of support, someone who could be manipulated into giving without question. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had worked too hard for my independence, my savings, my future to let them take it all away with empty promises and false hopes. I thought I had made the right decision, but the emotional pressure they applied only deepened the conflict. Jake and Bella had made their feelings clear. I was the selfish one. They had labeled me, just like that, without understanding what it took for me to get where I was. The more I reflected on it, the more I realized that what they were really asking for was control over my life, over my financial freedom. They wanted me to fall into the same trap they had created for themselves. As their words hit me like daggers, I realized this wasn't about business. It was about control. Weeks had passed since the dinner that had changed everything. I had tried to move on from the tense conversation with Jake and Bella, telling myself I had made the right decision. Their accusations had stung, but I believed I was strong enough to handle their rejection. The pressure from my family had eased, and life returned to its usual rhythm. But just when I thought the storm had passed, the universe had other plans. It started like any other evening. I had just finished work and was sitting on the couch with a book, the quiet of my apartment a welcome escape from the chaos of the past few weeks. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find a thick envelope, stamped with an official seal, wedged between the door and the frame. My heart sank. I could feel the weight of it before I even picked it up. I tore open the envelope, and as I pulled out the papers, my eyes froze on the words, "Lawsuit filed against Alex, last name." I felt a chill run down my spine, my hands shaking as I skimmed through the legal jargon. My mind raced to make sense of what I was reading. The claim was absurd. Jake and Bella were suing me for emotional distress and unwillingness to support my family. It was almost laughable. As I read through the details, the anger began to bubble up. The lawsuit claimed that because I was financially stable and had the resources to help, I had a moral obligation to fund their business venture. Their words echoed in my head: selfish, hoarding money, uncaring. This was no longer just about a business failure. They were trying to manipulate me into giving them money by painting me as the villain, the one who cared more about my savings than about family. I threw the papers down onto the coffee table, struggling to process what was happening. How could they accuse me of being selfish when all I had done was protect my future? How could they twist the truth like this? My mind raced as I thought about the months of careful saving, every decision I made to secure my future. This wasn't about money. It was about their desperation. And now they were dragging me into it. I knew I needed legal advice, so I called Michelle, a lawyer I trusted. When she saw the lawsuit, she raised an eyebrow and let out a short laugh. "This is a joke, right?" she asked, scanning the papers. "They don't have a leg to stand on, Alex. But we still have to take it seriously. It's a waste of your time, but they're making a move, and we have to respond." Michelle's confidence helped, but the stress was starting to wear on me. I couldn't believe that Jake and Bella would go this far, taking something as personal as family and twisting it into a financial weapon. I thought they had crossed a line by asking for money, but this was a new low. As Michelle explained the steps we'd need to take to defend myself, I felt a rising frustration. What kind of people would go to these lengths for money? I had seen their reckless spending habits, but this was different. They weren't just asking anymore. They were using the legal system to force me into a corner. But there was something else, something deeper I couldn't ignore. Why would they do this? Wasn't there pride at stake here? Wasn't there some shred of humanity left in them? Or had they truly become so desperate that they would sacrifice everything, even their own integrity, just to get a handout? The question gnawed at me. It wasn't just about the lawsuit. It was about how far Jake and Bella would go, how far they had already gone, to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty for having the one thing they lacked: discipline and self-control. I put the papers down, my heart heavy with the weight of what was unfolding. My family had crossed a line, and I knew that things were never going to be the same again. The fight ahead wouldn't just be about money. It would be about respect, about standing my ground, and showing Jake and Bella that their actions had consequences. I stood up, pacing the room as I replayed the words in my head. I never imagined they'd go this far. But now, my entire life is about to change. The first few days after receiving the lawsuit felt like an emotional whirlwind. I was angry, confused, and honestly a little lost. How had things gotten this bad? I didn't want to spend my life fighting my own family, but here I was, embroiled in a legal battle that had no reason to exist. The audacity of Jake and Bella to go this far, to accuse me of selfishness when I was the one being reasonable, was mind-boggling. But one thing was certain: I wasn't going to back down. Michelle was unwavering in her confidence. "We're going to crush them," she said after reviewing the lawsuit. "They have nothing, and we have everything." She advised starting with the most obvious move, asking Jake and Bella for their financial records. If they were truly struggling, there would be evidence to back it up. If they were lying, the truth would expose itself. I didn't want to get too hopeful, but the idea of exposing their financial recklessness gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since this nightmare started. It felt like the first real step toward justice. Michelle sent the request, and within days, Jake and Bella reluctantly complied. When I opened the first email with their financial documents, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was a treasure trove of evidence: vacations to Bali, designer handbags, and shopping sprees that totaled more than my annual salary. They had spent more money on frivolous luxuries than most people would in a lifetime, all the while claiming they were struggling financially. They had blown thousands on a luxury wellness retreat that was clearly a scam, and yet they had the nerve to accuse me of hoarding money and refusing to help them. The discovery sent a shockwave through me. This was no longer just about money. This was about deception. Jake and Bella had been lying not only to me but to everyone who would listen. They had wrapped themselves in the illusion of hardship while living the high life on credit. I realized that this wasn't about a simple business failure. It was about their refusal to face the reality of their irresponsible choices. They wanted someone else to blame, and I had become their scapegoat. Michelle quickly turned the evidence into a powerful defense. She had everything laid out: credit card bills, bank statements, receipts from luxury retailers, and the damning evidence of their extravagant vacations. Michelle built the case with precision, leaving no stone unturned. Each piece of evidence reinforced the truth. Jake and Bella had chosen to live beyond their means and had tried to manipulate me into funding their next failed business venture. As the case progressed, the pressure of it all began to take a toll on me. I had tried to focus on my work, on maintaining my usual routine, but the constant legal back and forth was exhausting. It wasn't just the time spent on emails and phone calls with Michelle. It was the emotional weight of being dragged into a battle with my own family. Every time I thought about it, the anger surged back.
How could they do this to me?
How could they put me in a position where I had to fight for something that should have been a non-issue? But despite the emotional toll, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. With every new piece of evidence that came in, I felt like I was gaining the upper hand. They thought they could control me, manipulate me into giving them what they wanted, but I had something far more powerful than money: truth. Truth had a way of cutting through their lies, and it felt like I was finally taking control of the situation. The more I learned about their reckless spending, the more confident I became that we could win this. As the days went by, I started to realize that this was more than just a lawsuit. It was a test of my boundaries, a challenge to my values, and ultimately, a fight for my peace of mind. I had worked so hard to build my life, to make sound financial decisions, and I wasn't going to let Jake and Bella take that away from me. They had underestimated me, and now they were going to learn just how far I was willing to go to protect what I had earned. I had no idea how the next few weeks would unfold, but for the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt like I had the upper hand. I wasn't just defending myself, I was fighting for the truth. And the truth, I knew, would always win. The courtroom was thick with tension as Jake tried to gather himself, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. He wasn't ready to accept the reality that everything he had worked so hard to build, his manipulative case, his idea of financial revenge, was crumbling right before his eyes. He stood up, his voice shaking, but trying to regain some of the confidence he had lost over the past few hours. "Your Honor," Jake began, but his voice wavered. "This is all a misunderstanding." Sit down, Mr. Daniels," the judge interrupted, his voice firm and his gaze unwavering. "We've heard enough of your excuses. The evidence speaks for itself." The judge's words hung heavy in the air, and for a brief moment, Jake seemed to shrink. He stammered, clearly struggling to find words that would salvage what was left of his case. His eyes flicked to Bella, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. She was no longer the supportive wife he had hoped would back him up. But then something unexpected happened. Sophia stood up, her body trembling, but her voice steady. The courtroom fell silent as all eyes turned to her. She walked towards the witness stand, and I could see the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The woman who had once stood by Jake's side, supporting his lies and manipulation, was now stepping forward to speak the truth. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice trembling with guilt. "I can't lie for him anymore. I've been manipulated. This wasn't just about the money. It was about control. And I've had enough." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jake's face turned pale, and I could see the shock in his eyes as he turned to look at Sophia, his mouth agape in disbelief. He hadn't expected this. He thought he had her under his thumb, that she would always stand by him. But now, she was tearing down everything they had built together. "I didn't want to do this," Sophia continued, her voice growing stronger. "But Daniel was the one who pushed me into this lawsuit. He told me it was our only way out, that we needed to go after Alex for money. He lied to me. He lied to all of us." Jake's jaw clenched, and he stood up abruptly, his anger palpable. "You're lying," he shouted, his voice breaking. "This is a setup, Sophia. You're turning on me now, in front of everyone." The judge raised his hand, signaling for calm. "Mr. Daniels, sit down," he ordered. Jake ignored him for a moment, but the coldness in the judge's voice forced him to sit back down. He glared at Sophia, his eyes dark with fury. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. The truth was out, and there was no hiding from it. Sophia's testimony had changed everything. She had confessed not only to being manipulated but also to the extent of Jake's reckless financial behavior. She revealed how he had pressured her into lying about their finances, hiding their extravagant spending, and even deceiving investors in their failed business ventures. The courtroom was stunned, and Jake's facade of innocence began to crumble. The lies they had carefully built were no longer believable. His once confident demeanor had given way to panic, and he was scrambling for a way to fix it. But then came the final blow. "I have more to say," Sophia continued, her voice steady now, as if the weight had finally lifted off her shoulders. "I found out that Daniel has been hiding money in secret accounts. He's been funneling it into businesses that don't even exist. I have the evidence. I have everything." The room fell silent as Sophia handed over more documents, bank records, emails, and transaction details, all showing the extent of Jake's deceit. He had been lying about his financial situation for years, hiding behind his charm and manipulation to cover up his irresponsible behavior. The judge looked through the documents, his expression growing more incredulous by the second. "Mr. Daniels, this is beyond comprehension. You have been running a scheme, and now you've been caught. This case will be dismissed with prejudice, and I recommend you seek legal counsel for the serious charges you will face." Jake's face went white as the judge's words sank in. He had no comeback, no explanation. The case had disintegrated in front of him, and there was nothing left to save. As the judge banged his gavel, signaling the end of the trial, I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. This was my moment, my victory. Not because of the money, not because of the lawsuit, but because I had stood my ground. I had fought for my dignity, for my rights, and I wasn't about to let them ruin me. As I left the courtroom, I could see Jake and Bella standing in the back, their faces filled with anger and disbelief. I didn't even look at them. I knew that they would never understand the lesson they had learned today, but I had. The lesson was clear. Sometimes, the people who try to manipulate you into giving up everything you've worked for are the ones who will ultimately destroy themselves. This was the end of their game, and I was free. The courtroom doors slammed shut behind me as I walked out into the hallway, my heart still racing from the final moments of the trial. The weight of the victory had not quite settled, but a sense of relief washed over me. The worst was finally over. Jake and Bella had been exposed, and the truth had won. Yet, even as I stood there, a strange emptiness lingered. Their loss didn't feel as sweet as I had imagined. For weeks, I had held my breath, waiting for this day. The lawsuit, the stress, the emotional manipulation, it had all been building to this moment. And yet, as the judge's gavel struck down and declared the case dismissed with prejudice, I realized that this was no longer just about proving them wrong.
It was about me.
I had never expected it to come to this. Family, especially blood relatives, are supposed to support each other, right? But as the trial unfolded, I saw the truth of who they were. They didn't care about family. They cared about what they could get from me. They didn't see me as a person, but as a resource. And in their desperation to fix their mistakes, they had tried to pull me into their mess, without any regard for the damage it would do to me. But the truth was, I had been much stronger than I thought. I stood my ground when everyone around me tried to tear me down, and for the first time in my life, I didn't cave. I wasn't just defending my money, I was defending my integrity, my peace, and my right to control my own future. As the reality of the situation sank in, I realized something. The lawsuit wasn't just a battle over money. It was about control. They had tried to control my decisions, manipulate me into helping them fund their reckless ventures, all while trying to make me feel guilty for not playing along. They wanted me to cave to the pressure, to hand over my savings and my security for their foolishness. But in the end, I was the one who remained in control. In the weeks that followed, Jake and Bella's financial struggles continued. Their reckless behavior had caught up with them, and their businesses, if you could even call them that, collapsed. I wasn't surprised. I knew from the start that they were living beyond their means, pretending to be something they weren't. Now, they had nothing left, not even the pride they had once worn so proudly. The facade had crumbled, and all that was left was the truth. They had mismanaged everything, and now they had to face the consequences. As for our relationship, it was over. There was no going back after what had happened. The trust had been shattered, and the family bond was broken. They had shown me who they really were, and I couldn't unsee it. In the beginning, I had been torn about whether I should try to salvage things, but now I knew that there was nothing left to save.
They didn't value me. They didn't respect me.
And the hardest part? I had allowed myself to believe that they did. But even as my relationship with them crumbled, something inside me shifted. I had emerged from this trial stronger, more resilient than ever before. I had faced their manipulation head-on and refused to let it break me. I had learned an invaluable lesson in standing up for myself, in trusting my instincts, and in knowing when to walk away. I realized that my life was in my hands, and I didn't have to let anyone else dictate my worth or my future. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, focusing on rebuilding my career and my life. I knew that this experience had changed me for the better. I had learned to say no when I needed to protect my peace, and to prioritize my own happiness. I was no longer the person who would let others walk all over me or allow myself to be manipulated. I had my own voice now, and I wasn't afraid to use it. They thought I would be destroyed by their lies, that their manipulation would break me. But instead, I was reborn. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. I had learned that I was capable of far more than I ever gave myself credit for. I had discovered a new strength, a new sense of purpose, and a new understanding of what truly mattered in life. And as I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons of the past, determined not to let anyone else take what was rightfully mine, my peace, my security, and my self-respect. The future was mine to shape, and I wasn't about to let anyone ruin it again. The days after the trial felt surreal. I had spent so much time tied up in the chaos, worrying about how it would all unfold. But now it is over. The lawsuit, the manipulation, the constant pressure from my family, it was all behind me. What remained was a sense of peace I had never felt before, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Looking back, I realized how much I had learned. I had always been careful with my money, guarding it fiercely because I knew the value of security. But this experience had taught me that my security wasn't just financial, it was also emotional and mental. Jake and Bella had wanted to destroy that security, to force me into a position where I would sacrifice my peace to help them fix their mistakes. But instead of breaking me, they had only reinforced my resolve to protect myself. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to avoid confrontation, trying to keep the peace in the family. I had let them manipulate me for far too long, allowing them to believe that I was a source of endless resources to fix their irresponsible spending. But no more. This experience has shown me that true peace comes from setting boundaries and standing firm on your values. It wasn't about being selfish. It was about recognizing that I, too, deserved respect and the right to make my own decisions without fear of guilt or shame. As I moved forward, I realized that my financial security was only part of the equation. The bigger lesson was about living life on my own terms. For too long, I had let others define my actions, let their needs dictate my choices. Now I was free from that. I didn't owe anyone anything. My money, my time, my energy, they were mine to spend how I saw fit. And I vowed that I would never again allow anyone to make me feel like I had to give it away to meet their demands. The hardest part had been trusting myself. For so long, I had questioned whether I was doing the right thing, whether I was being too harsh by refusing to lend them the money. But in the end, I knew I had made the right choice. Their sense of entitlement had blinded them to the reality of their situation. They didn't understand what it meant to be responsible, to build something from the ground up. They expected others to bail them out, to fund their reckless decisions, without considering the consequences. And now, they were left with nothing. Jake and Bella had lost more than just their lawsuit. They had lost the trust of the people who mattered most. They had destroyed their own lives with their selfishness and manipulation. And while I had come out of this stronger, they were left to face the consequences of their action. But I wasn't focused on their downfall. What mattered now was my future. I had learned that the greatest revenge isn't about seeking payback or trying to make others feel the same pain they caused you. It's about living a life they never imagined, on your own terms. That's exactly what I intended to do. I vowed to never let anyone control my life again. I had learned to value my peace, my integrity, and my independence more than anything else. It was time to embrace a new chapter, one where I could live without fear of manipulation or guilt. I knew that life wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready to face whatever came my way. And as I walked away from the wreckage of the past, I realized that my real success wasn't about the money I had saved or the things I owned. It was about the strength I had gained, the confidence to stand up for myself, and the courage to live life on my own terms. That was the true reward, and it was something no one could take away from me. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the story. Your support helps bring more powerful stories to life.